Okay, I guess we'll start now. Welcome to the second session. Lucia Huang and Jesse Don will be teaching, and I will act as their TA. Good luck. Good luck, Lucia and Jesse.
Okay, hello guys. I guess we'll get started with introductions. So, my name is Jesse Deng. I started playing chess when I was about 5 years old-ish. Fun fact, I actually taught Eric how to play chess here, or I introduced Eric to chess. Um, I'm rated about 1700 right now. Some things I enjoy doing in my free time are learning magic tricks, playing with Rubik's cubes, and also, of course, playing chess. Now I'll let Lucia introduce herself.
I'm Lucia, and my rating is also about 1700 right now. I started playing chess when I was 4 years old, and what I like doing in my free time is baking and playing chess.
Okay, so now we'll get started with the lesson. Lucia can take it away.
So for the second class, we will be learning about checkmate, special rules, and real games. So there are actually multiple ways to make a draw. The first one is a stalemate. It's basically when you you can't make any checks, the king can't move. And then the second way to make a draw is three move repetition, where you repeat a position 3 times. The third way to make a draw is a 50 move rule, which we'll cover later, and the 75 move rule. And then the fifth way to make a draw is an agreement, and there's insufficient material and insufficient material versus timeout. So a stalemate is when a player is stalemated when he has no legal moves and is not in check. The game ends in a draw. Neither player wins and neither player loses. And so you can actually see in the picture here, that's an example of a stalemate. So the three move repetition is when the exact same position is repeated 3 times with the same castling rights for both players and the same en passant rights. So the 50 move rule occurs when no pawn moves have been played for 50 moves in a row, and no pieces have been captured for 50 moves in a row, and any player can call the draw. The 75 move rule is very similar to the 50 move rule, except the draw is automatic and mandatory by the arbiter. So insufficient material occurs when neither player has enough remaining pieces to legally deliver a checkmate, resulting in an immediate draw. And a draw by insufficient material occurs when one side runs out of time, and that's called like flagging. But they do not have enough material to force a checkmate. Right, so the picture here shows an example of insufficient material. Okay, so now let's look at the pawn. If white, for example, has a pawn on the fifth rank and black has a pawn that is on the seventh rank on an adjacent file to the white's pawn, and black moves the pawn 2 squares forward, then white's pawn can capture black's pawn by moving diagonally to the square right behind black's pawn. This is called the en passant. Oh, sorry. So, in the first picture, the white pawn moves forward by 2 squares, which is right next to the black pawn. So therefore the black pawn can choose to either go forward or take the white pawn. And in the second picture, like you are not able to en passant at all because the pawns would never be close to each other.
He's only getting I get it. I mean, certain the one the
Oh, so let's look at the king now. Castling is the only move where um one can move two pieces in one move. So in the first picture, you can see the both kings are castled, and in the second picture, the king can go castle in both ways. It can go king side or queen side. Castling involves moving one's king and one of one's rook. Castling is considered a king's move, so make sure to touch your king first and not the rook, or else it would be counted as a rook's move. And castling short, which is called castling queenside, uh, the king moves from E1 to G1, and the rook moves from H1 to F1. The chess notation would look like an O dash O. And castling long, um, where the king moves from E1 to C1, the rook would move from A1 to D1, and the chess notation would look like O dash O dash O. A player can castle only if the player's king has not moved, the player's rook that he is castling with has not moved either, and there are no pieces between the king and the rook that he is castling with, and the player is not in check, and the squares that the king must pass through is in order to not castle, it must not be attacked by an opponent's piece.
There's a little typo on the slide here. Castling short is called castling kingside, and castling long is castling queenside. Also, for clarification, this last sentence here, the squares that the king must pass through in order to castle must not be attacked by his opponent's piece. So, for example, if the king were trying to castle kingside, no, like, for example, if a bishop were on like b5, nothing can attack f1 and nothing can attack g1. These two squares can't be attacked if the king's in a castle. And then same thing for queenside.
So the first picture actually oh first picture actually shows an example of the king castling queenside. And the third picture shows an example of the king castling kingside. So here are some castling or not examples. Um, I want you guys to feel free to put your answer in the chat. You can say like, for example, one is castling or not castling, two is castling, not castling. Okay, so it seems like many of you have gotten the right answers. So in the first picture, the king can castle kingside but not queenside because there's a bishop guarding the C1 square. And in the second picture, the king cannot castle either way because it is being checked by a knight. And in the third picture, the king can castle either way because there's nothing in the way. Yeah, and also good job, everyone. So do you guys know how to do maiden ones? If you do, please raise your hand in um the Zoom meeting. Okay, I see one person, or actually two people. Is there anyone else that knows how to do a maiden one? Oh, three people? Anyone else? So it seems like people are already getting the answer in the chat. So I'll go over uh the mates and why they are mates now. So in the first picture, the answer is Rook H8 because oh my God. The White King is guarding three squares, so meaning you only need a rook to attack the rest of the squares on the eighth rank. And a way by doing that is going Rook H8, which is also checking the king at the same time, forcing a mate. And the answer to the second puzzle is also Rook H8 because the rook is guarding the seventh rank, meaning that the king cannot advance any further. So you need another piece to attack the eighth rank. And the rook perfectly does that by going to H8. And in the third puzzle, the answer is Queen G7, um, trapping the king while also checking the king. And if you're wondering, like, why can't the king just take the queen? Well, there's a pawn on F6 guarding the queen, so that is also a checkmate.
One more thing. These are just some common like checkmate patterns. Uh, no, the second puzzle here is called a ladder mate, where you use your two rooks or a queen and a rook, and they cut off the king like one rank or one file at a time until you just force the king to the edge of the board. This first puzzle here, this is what we call a back rank mate. So it's when the king is trapped by like its pawns or your pawns trapping it or something, and then you just bring your rook to the last square to like deliver the checkmate. The king's cut off, it can't get off the back rank. And then, wait, can you guys see my cursor here? You can see my cursor? Okay. Okay, so you said you can see my cursor, so we'll do so here, the first puzzle, the white king blocks the black king from moving forward to these three squares C7, D7, and E7. So then the white rook can go to H8, and this is checkmate because the king can't move to the sides because the rook is guarding them. The rook attacks the king, and the king also can't move to these three squares because the white king stops it. So the black king has nowhere to move and it's under attack, so that's why this one's checkmate. Now for the next one, we have this white rook on G7 here. This rook cuts off the black king from moving anywhere. Like this entire rank here. By the way, ranks are what we call the horizontal things on the chessboard, and files are the vertical ones. So the rook cuts off the seventh rank here, the white rook, so the other rook can come to H8. And here the black king can't move forward here. It's blocked off. So the white rook can attack the king and deliver checkmate on the back rank. Now for the third one, this is just a queen and helper mate. So here, the white queen, when it moves to G7, the white pawn here guards the queen, guards the square the queen's going to check on. And then the black king, it has nowhere to go because the white queen, when the white queen attacks the black king from one square away, it also guards all these squares. It takes away these squares from the king moving. And then the king can't take the queen because the king's defended by the pawn. So now we're gonna show one of the most like famous chess games ever played. It's one sec, let me reshare my screen. Here we go. So this is one of the most famous chess games ever played. It's called the opera game. It was played in the year 1858 by Paul Morphy. He was an American dude invited to like I think it was Paris to watch an opera. And then these two, he played against two people. It was I don't know their names. It was some duke and a count, I think. Anyways, he played a very like instructive game against these two people. Now, legends say that he was playing this game in the middle of an opera. So, Paul Morphy, he really wanted to finish this game quickly. He did not want to take time on it and play like a slow game. So, here we have okay. So we're going to start the game. So, white starts off here with e4. This is like a standard king's pawn opening, right? White starts off with e4, taking control of the center. You guys know when you play a chess game, you need to try to get your pawns in the center, take control of the center. That's how we start, right? Now, black responds with a standard e5. This is just like a normal opening. Um, Now the bishop, also white, by moving the pawn two squares, it frees the bishop and the queen to develop. Same for black here. Now, usually, you can play many different variations here: knight c3, knight f3, bishop c4, etc. Usually we see knight f3 here. This is like 99% of games go with this. Now, these days you'll see like knight c6 or like knight f6. These attack the center pawn. Knight f6 attacks the center pawn. Knight c6 is just your standard like standard opening, how people normally play these days. But back then, back in 1858, d6 was a pretty popular move. So d6 is an okay move. It's called the Philidor defense. The thing about d6 though, it protects this pawn right here because here white was threatening to take this pawn if nothing happened. So d6 is played. D6 protects this pawn, but d6 blocks in the black bishop. The black bishop can't get out now. So that's why d6 is a not so ideal move. So now Morphe, you can continue this game usually in a variety of ways. Bishop c4 is one of them. Knight c3. Just developing your pieces in general. But Morphe, again, he wanted to win this game quickly. So he played d4 in a pretty explosive move. He's trying to break open the center. And usually in these, as a beginner, you're taught you should try to control the center. If you can get two pawns in the center of the board, do that. So that's just some general advice. Next, usually these days, if this ever happens, you'll see takes. Black's gonna take your pawn on d4. This is just like this is what usually happens. Here, the count and the duke decide to play bishop to g4, pinning the knight to the queen, which technically defends the pawn on e5 because now if you take, black takes back. But this just loses a pawn because here once black pins the knight to the queen, here takes, and takes doesn't work because now the bishop can just take the queen. But instead, once white takes the pawn and black takes the pawn, now white can take the queen with check. And then once black takes the queen back, now white's knight isn't pinned anymore and white can take the pawn for free. So bishop g4 is more of a blunder because black just loses a pawn for no reason. Now black can't castle anymore. You always want to try and keep your right to castle because castling gets your king to safety. And remember, the most important piece in chess is the king. If your king gets checkmated, you lose. So black surrenders his right to castle and white attacks black's pawn and black's bishop. So here, that's why bishop g4 isn't really a good move. Now, bishop g4, Paul Morphy plays d takes e5, he takes this pawn, but instead of recapturing, we just saw what happens if black recaptures. Black decides he's going to take the knight with his bishop, because now black doesn't lose a pawn. Now, white can either recapture with the pawn or recapture with the queen. Now, recapturing with the pawn, usually you don't want to do this. You don't want to get doubled pawns. These weaken your position, and doubled pawns become easy targets later in the game. And this also opens up your king if you want to castle later. So Paul Morphy decides to take with the queen. He takes the bishop on f3, and then black recaptures the pawn. Now, try to see if you guys can find like a good developing move for white here. You want to try to do a forcing move in the position. So you want to find a move for white right now that when white develops, it's like you develop with something called a tempo. So you're attacking the opponent when you develop. So they're forced to play something and they can't continue their development, basically. So try to see if you can find a forcing move for white here. A good developing move. Put your answers in the chat. Also, has everyone understand everything we've gone over so far? Everything made sense so far? Okay.
If you have any questions, don't feel free to just ask any of us.
Okay, so everyone who said bishop c4, good job. That's the correct move. Everyone who said queen g4, um, so a general opening principle is you don't want to move the same piece twice. Here, queen g4, for one thing, queen g4 doesn't like do anything. When I said make threats, queen g4 doesn't really threaten anything. So queen g4 is basically just moving your queen a second time for no reason. And black can just continue their development now, like knight f6 attacks your queen. Now your queen's forced to move again, and you're just wasting a lot of time in the opening here. So instead, we have bishop to c4. So here, bishop c4, you attack this pawn on f7. So you're threatening checkmate here. If black doesn't defend this f7 pawn, then white just takes with the queen, and that's checkmate. So here, when you play bishop c4, that frees your king up to castle, so you can castle now because there's nothing blocking the way anymore. And you're threatening checkmate. So now black's forced to either defend the pawn somehow or like block one of your pieces from attacking the pawn. So in the game, black goes knight to f6. This is the game or this is the move black decides on here. Now, knight to f6, it blocks the queen. It blocks the queen's sight to the f7 square. So now you can't white can't deliver checkmate. So next up, Morphy finds a really nice idea. Usually you'd see like knight c3 or like a castle or something like that, just a developing move. That would be like a pretty standard move. Morphy finds an idea though, which is queen to b3. Now, I know on the last move I said you usually don't want to move one of your pieces twice as a beginner. Here, Morphy's not a beginner though. He's like one of the most talented chess players in his era. So, if Morphy reroutes his queen here, because he sees this square on b7 and this square on f7, he can attack both of them because he puts his queen behind his bishop. By the way, this is called a battery, where two pieces team up that move in the same direction to attack a different piece. So here the queen and the bishop works together to attack f7, and the queen attacks b7. So now Morphy reroutes the queen, and this is a fork where he attacks both of these pieces. So now, as black, I want to ask you, as black, type your answers in the chat here. As black, which pawn are you defending? Are you defending this one or are you defending this one? Okay, it looks like we have a bunch of answers. F7 is the correct answer. So, uh, B7, this isn't really an important pawn because, uh, I don't know. If white takes this pawn, it's attacking your rook, but again, remember the king's the most important piece. So, white's also threatening to attack your king here to take your pawn and check your king, maybe checkmate your king soon. So, here generally you don't want to let your king get attacked, so you want to defend this pawn here mostly. This one's the important one. So in the game, he decides queen e7 is a good move to defend the pawn. Now, I know some of you might be worried that queen takes b7, now white lost the rook, no? Or black lost the rook because the rook's trapped here. But here, the black has an idea with queen e7, which is queen to b4 check. So here, this forks the white's queen and white's king. The queen's attacking both pieces, and now if white doesn't trade queens, then black's just going to take white's queen on the next move. So here, white has to trade queens, and I don't know, now block, and then this just becomes a normal game again. But again, white's still better in this position, but again, Morphy, he was watching an opera at this time. He was challenged to this chess match in the middle of an opera. So he didn't want to play a normal game and have it take forever. So here, Morphy, he doesn't take this pawn. This is up a pawn, but Morphy wanted to end this game quickly. So queen takes b7. It's a pretty good move, but not the best move here. Morphy instead he decides to continue developing his pieces. Now here you can either castle, you can play a pin. Morphy decides to play knight to c3. Now knight to c3 is just getting another one of your pieces out. Development, just keep developing. And now black. Oh, knight to c3, one more thing. Knight to c3 also blocks the idea of black checking white on the b4 square. So now white's actually threatening to take this pawn on b7. So Here, black decides he needs to guard this pawn, and black chooses to play c6. Now c6, you just move the pawn and your queen protects the other pawn. So now Morphy, he can castle or he opts for bishop g5. This adds more pressure on the black position. You're pinning the knight to the queen, and you have two options to castle now. White can go either way in castling. And this is sometimes better. You just want to keep the options open. And now black decides to play a very rebellious move. Now, black usually, because he doesn't have a lot of options here. His bishop's blocked in by his queen. Um, I guess he could develop the knight, but he doesn't really have any much options. He could play like h6 or something. But black chooses to try and attack white. Black lashes out with the move b5. So after the move b5, let me know in the chat what would you play as white here? Also, you have really two options. You either like move your bishop out of the way, or you can take the pawn with a piece. Okay, no, I'll just say this one because I guess it's not too obvious, but here white does something called a sacrifice. Morphy decides because again the goal of chess, right, is to get to the black king, right? Whoever gets checkmate wins. So here, Morphy plays knight takes b5. So knight takes b5, he's trying to attack the black king because he sees if black takes back the knight, which is what happens, then white can take the pawn again. And this is like an attack on the black king. So, and also you notice black is in a very cramped position here. So Morphy sees like this is opportunity to hurry up and win the game so we can go back to watching the show. So now we have bishop takes b5 check. This attacks the king. Now the king has a couple options here. You can either play the knight here, lose the queen. You can play the queen here, lose the queen. Or you can block with the knight. This is what happens in the game. Or you can play king d8, which you just lose your right to castle. So black thinks like the other three options, or the other two options, losing your queen and losing your right to castle. Black doesn't really like either of those. By the way, if you play king d8, white can actually do a queenside castle with check. And yeah, if I were black here, I would not want to be playing this position. This position looks scary. So black decides he's gonna move the knight here. So knight d7, it blocks the king from under attack. So, but now the thing is, white has like two monstrous pins. Like the king's pin here, by the way, we have two types of pins in chess. This one's called an absolute pin. An absolute pin is where a piece is pinned to the king, and it's not possible for you to move that piece because then your king would get taken, and that's not allowed in chess. This one is called like a relative pin. You can move the knight if you want. It's just that the bishop's going to take your queen, but losing your queen's allowed in chess. So here, Morphe, he has two pins here, but he's thinking how can he attack more, how can he get more pieces to attack Black's king? Black's king's stuck in the center of the board and he wants to attack. So Morphe plays queenside castle. Now, this is a great move because it brings this rook from A1 immediately into the center. Now, if you decided to opt for kingside castle, this isn't as forcing because now black has time to move. Like you're letting black off the hooks a little. So queenside castle here, you're putting more pressure on this pinned knight. So now your bishop and your rook are attacking it. And now like black's forced to try and find a way to defend himself. So in the black's pretty much like already like almost lost here. So black plays rook to d8. He opts for this to defend his knight. And now we have another sacrifice. Here, Paul Morphy. Now, if you see you have a pin like this in a game, you generally hear Paul Morphy doesn't want to let go of the pin. So he decides to take the knight with the rook. Here, if you take with the bishop, you're just losing your pin. Now you don't have any more pressure on black. Black can just retake. And yeah, he's pretty fine. So here, Morphy decides to take with the rook because now when black recaptures, no, if black recaptures with the knight, he loses his queen. If black recaptures with the queen, he also loses his queen. So black takes with the rook because he can't take with the king. So black takes with the rook, and now Morphy just took, and now he still has the pin to apply pressure on the black position. Now Morphy brings his other rook. So he takes his other rook and replaces his old rook with it. So now we basically replace the pin. It's the same pressure on the opponent's like pin piece. But now you just removed a defender. Now black doesn't really have a way to defend himself anymore, so we'll show the remainder of the game. The game ends in style. So black he plays queen to e6, offering a queen trade and unpinning his knight here. So this knight guards the rook. Because before the knight couldn't guard the rook because it was being pinned to the queen. So here black plays queen to e6. Now white plays bishop takes d7 check. Black, he obviously doesn't want to take with the queen, that loses his queen. So black takes with the knight. And now white finishes this game in style. White goes. Now you see that the rook has tunnel vision to this square here. If the rook can get there, that's checkmate. Oh, okay. Here, you guys can find the move. What is white supposed to play? Put your answers in the chat. Okay, it looks like here people found the move. The right move is indeed queen b8 check. This is a brilliant move. So here, again, the knight's blocking the rook from delivering checkmate on this d8 square. This is where the rook wants to go. That's checkmate. So here, you see the knight's blocking the square. So now you want to play a move that can force the knight to move out of the way. So Morphy plays queen b8 check. Now this checks the king. The white bishop cuts off the king from moving here. So now the king's effectively checkmated. If not for the knight that could take the queen. So here, black's forced to take the queen with the knight, and white delivers checkmate with the rook d8 checkmate. And that's the whole game. That's how Paul Morphy played one of the most fascinating games of chess ever. By the way, this game was 168 years ago and it's still like the most famous game today. So just goes to show you how amazing the game was. So we'll do 1 second. So now we'll go. If anyone has any questions, you can type it in the chat and we'll go over them again. If anyone needs some clarification on what we started with, because we went a little fast at the start. You can also unmute and say if you want to go over something. Anything?
Yeah, uh, all of us are here to help. If you have any questions, please ask.
Did everyone understand everything we went over?
Can you?
Okay, well, I guess we'll just go back over the beginning because we rushed it a bit. So, Lucia.
So I'll be re-explaining some of the concepts from the first part of the class. For a recap, there are in total 7 ways to draw: stalemate, 3-move repetition, 50-move rule, 75-move rule, agreement, insufficient material, and insufficient material versus timeout. So actually, I feel like one of the most common ones are stalemate, 3-move repetition, and agreement. And actually, I've had one 50-move rule game before and insufficient material. So you could also come across like any of these at any time.
Oh, by the way, insufficient material versus timeout, that's something where it usually happens in like fast games where you're playing like bullet chess or something. But how it happens is one person is out of time, but the other person doesn't have enough pieces to checkmate them. So it becomes a draw, even though one person loses on time.
So, for another recap, a player is stalemated if he has no legal moves and is not in check, or the game ends in a draw, which neither player wins and neither player loses. And so in this picture, you can see an example of the king not being able to move anymore, therefore putting black in a stalemate. Three-move repetition is when the exact same position is repeated 3 times, with the same castling rights for both players and the same en passant rights. And the 50 move rule is when no pawn moves have been played for 50 moves in a row and no pieces have been captured for 50 moves in a row. And in this case, any player can call the draw.
Now one more thing, we explained both the 50 and the 75 move last time. The key difference is that the 50 move rule, the players don't have to draw. The player can call the TD over and say like I want to draw because it's been 50 moves if they have the notation to prove it, but you don't have to make a draw at 50 moves. Here at 75 moves, if none of these things happen, the draw is like required. The draw happens immediately.
For insufficient material, it occurs when neither player has enough remaining pieces to deliver a checkmate, resulting in an immediate draw. So in the picture, there's a king and a knight versus a king, and a knight by itself cannot deliver a checkmate. Therefore, this position would be called an insufficient material position. And back to the en passant, if white has a pawn on the 5th rank and black has a pawn on the 7th rank, and that is adjacent to the file of white's pawn, and black moves the pawn 2 squares forward, then white's pawn can capture um bla- ooh, okay, so here here, hold on, there are a bit of some technical errors. All right, so we're back again. In this example here, okay, so in this example, there's a white pawn on c4 and there's a black pawn on b4. Um, so the white pawn has moved from c2 to c4, and following the rules for en passant, the black pawn can legally make an en passant capture by going diagonal. And in the second picture, the black nor white can make an en passant because they are not adjacent to each other, meaning that they are not right next to each other.
Yeah, you have any last questions?
Oh
Please
no,
ask us.
We also have some homework for you guys to do, and feel free to try any of the puzzles.
You guys aren't sharing screen, uh, by the way.
says I'm screen sharing. Oh, let me try again.
Share screen.
You see it?
Uh, yeah, just show these and they can screenshot it or you can just send it on group chat or something. Yeah.
Uh, everyone take a picture of the screen right now.
And afterwards they'll send it,
Okay.
get your parents to send it on group chat.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, we'll send this in the WeChat group chat afterwards, but did everyone got a screenshot if they wanted?
Yeah, and then just work on these. Yeah, and I guess another good source to supplement whatever you guys are learning here is like Lichess. Lichess, let me send it. Let me send it.
Also in the last homework slide, just for some clarification, the king has not been moved at all.
Like I
So
said,
it is still legible for a check. Sorry,
Oh yeah,
for
castling is possible in this position.
yeah, Lichess practice if you need. It's good learning material.
Oh, does anyone else want me to revisit a slide?
Yeah, and I guess Jesse, yeah, send the homework and also I think the my link Lichess practice. You just always social.
Okay.
I think it's pretty good. Recommend.
I'll just send the slides and this to my mom and then she can send it.
Yeah, and my link.
Okay. Everyone good? Okay, well, that's the end of the class. I hope everyone learned something about chess. Hope you keep playing, trying to get better at chess. Also, wait, everyone watches Gotham Chess, right? He's like the best. He's the best chess YouTuber out there. Sir, on YouTube, search up Gotham Chess. You'll be so much more interested in chess after you hear him talk about a chess game. Okay,
I
well,
guess yeah, I guess we'll be wrapping it up here and see you next time. Bye.
All right. Good day, everyone. Hope you come
okay, bye everyone. Have a good summer.